Hi, this is David Shepard with the DFW Nerd Night Design Competition. The second to last video that I have to make for this thing, so probably the last time you're going to see my face for a while. Unless, of course, you come visit me at Protospiel Milwaukee is the next convention I'll be attending. With my entry, PanZoo, wanted to give a general overview on how the design came about happening. Now, as some may know, going into the competition, I went with the idea of not having just a single idea, but rather to rapidly spitball 3 different concepts initially, then I tagged on an additional 2. And then the 5th one was just too labor intensive to recreate to actually send on. So just out of respect of judges, the 5th one just never really even got shown or entered. But I'm currently working on that one because a couple people said it seems like a neat idea. They'd like to see it implemented. The one that I ended up finalizing was PanZoo, which was previously referred to as Zoo to Man. Now, starting out in the competition, the first entry was a trick-taking game. The second entry, which was a real strong one called Zoo to Man, eventually became PanZoo. And just to give a brief overview, this is what the initial prototype looked like. So basically fairly straightforward cards, a little bit of section on the zoo up here, the cost, and victory point conditions. And as you can tell, early in the game, looked real hard to keep track of how the different things connected. But the prototype was set out as, is this concept good? Is it clean? Is it clear? For the most part it was. Whether or not it was fun really depended upon how I could actually engage potential players going forward with the graphic design. Now, the thing that was part of the challenge in this game design was I wanted to, like, if I would have gone with the 5th design, it would have been a pain for people to recreate just to test. But more importantly, it would have been a much longer shot to actually get potentially published or kickstarted. So I wanted to not so much stretch my goals in regards to pushing forward on coming up with a wild game design based on having as many different components as possible, but rather something I could take forward outside of the competition. So, with that in mind, I turned around and posted some pictures and sketches of potential animals that would end up in the game. The card layout on the cards would stay for the most part the same from the prototype into the final design, well, final for the competition. But a couple things changed from the initial playtest. The first playtest, well, the first couple playtests, the thing that was most bothering people was being able to visually tell where their areas were, as well as having 6 different types of locations just seemed to be too hard to be able to do anything real good with. So I first reduced that number from 6 down to 5, which really seemed to help with the concept level. We also toyed around with the concept of adding special buildings that would have unique abilities based on where they're placed in the park. Naturally, whenever we first started coming up with stuff, it was a list of about 12 buildings. Some of them good, some of them okay. But for the most part, we started shaving down from the concept of which buildings would make logical sense and so far as having 70 cards to work with, because if every card had a building, they wouldn't really be an option, they would really just be something you did. So from there, I knew that I only had to deal with the 70 cards as a baseline for the actual game. Now, the Zoo Prestige initially started out as the concept of you get a point whenever you take the panda, as well as you get a point at the beginning of each round. That ended up becoming way overpowered as, well, unless you get one of the cards that allowed you to steal the panda, it just stayed there in order to keep generating points round after round. One person kept the panda for about 6 turns in the game, which means for that one card that he played, he gained 7 points in the long term. Now, what we did as a change in that regard was you still got the point whenever you took the panda. However, you had to be able to move the tourist onto the or adjacent to the space where the panda currently resided. In that regard, that helped to make it, you had the potential to earn extra points, but it was part of a chore. It was part of a task that you had to work towards. It wasn't just automatically given. Also, under the most circumstances, that meant that you could basically choose between getting the cards or getting the points. So that game design element got tweaked a little bit as we went in through the design iteration. And whenever I use the we, I actually go with the whole, I basically asked a lot of my playtesters what they thought going forward and which things would make sense, would make things better. Now, the components that I included from here, I also wanted to make sure that the game was fairly simple to play, but offered a lot of options. And one of the things that the design struggled with early on, and still especially based on how many cards somebody has in hands, is there are a lot of options. And that, under certain players, can sort of drag the game to a halt. The one thing that I did going in initially was that the investor chart. And the investor chart started out fairly simple, a generic, here's a list, roll a dice. Made it a little bit more elaborate, as you can see right here. This, you change columns between rounds, roll the dice to see which place the investors actually preferred. This too, in my opinion, that's just not interesting. That's just not fun to play with. Now, I haven't had a chance to play with the new investor chart, aside from playing around with it a little bit with a token and a dice, and this seemed to be a much bigger improvement, but as you can tell, hasn't been cut out from the Staples visit yet. But you can see it right there. Basically, whenever the panda token is rolled on the D6, it resets the token to the center of the chart. And then from there, from the center of the chart, whenever you roll the D6, if you get any number, it moves out along the path from that circle. And then from that circle, the next turn, you roll the D6, you find out which direction it heads out of that circle into the next circle. So it's a little bit more slidey around the board with exits, entrances, and hopefully it isn't too complex. I mean, I can follow it along fine, but also keep in mind, I play fairly advanced games, so this investor situation, I hope, is a pretty clear-cut solution to making a pretty decent investor situation or design without just saying screw it and taking the system from San Juan to go, okay, well then here's your payout for the investors this round. I don't want to do that, and also maybe a publisher doesn't want to make cardboard just to accommodate that one feature. Now, did a couple play tests with the latest version, and that had led to pointing out several rebalancing issues, such as, well, a lot of the victory point conditions were based on having certain animals, and it would only give you 1 point. And I thought, well, that would be plenty. But because the having the largest exhibit of Tundra gave something like 8 points if you can pull it off, only I was going after some of the animal victory points. So I kind of made it to where the animals, there are 11 of each type of animal throughout the deck in the game, each offering 2 victory points each instead of 1, because 11 out of 70 cards to end up in your deck would be fairly difficult to pull off to maximize your points. So that will hopefully offer options beyond just me taking advantage of those. But it all depends on, for the most part, the people who played. This was their first couple games. So how these strategies will move on going forward through multiple playthroughs is up in air for anybody. Now, because I focused on fairly simple components as well as cards, I thought it would be a real easy thing to try to pitch people. Here's cards, here's a little bit of components you need to throw in the box. Do you like? But it's up in the air over whether or not this can get published through a traditional publisher. I'd really like them to take it on just to get me a little bit of credibility before I try to take some of my more ambitious designs onto Kickstarter. No, provided I don't sell my more ambitious designs to a publisher. So, I'm gonna be honest, the final balances that I made last minute before turning it in, I haven't had a chance to playtest, so there may still be imbalances, but for the most part I feel pretty confident about it going into the competition. I'm not exactly the most innovative contestant entry into the competition, but I do feel that I have a fairly strong card game. It's got a nice theme, which almost anybody can get into, like, well, build a zoo, of course. It allowed me to have cute artwork as opposed to some of the more, I want to say, dry artwork that I tend to put in some of my games. So, in the ultimate goal, while you can see the artwork of the game currently is this kind of bland regional thing, if I move it forward, I would have to say I want to redo what the pens look like, and honestly maybe even the animals, because I don't know if there's anybody else out there, but I grew up in the St. Louis area next to Six Flags Mid-America, and one of the things they had was you would go there for the day and they would give you a map where everything was. And the map had all these cool sections of illustration where a bunch of people would be walking around the park, and it gave you an overview of the park itself, but it did it in a fun, dynamic way. And I feel like if I want to go forward with this game, in fact I really do, because a lot of people have enjoyed it, what they've gotten a chance to play with. If I do go forward with the game, I want to make it very fun, very dynamic, something that somebody looks at the end of the game and goes, wow, that's really cool looking, even though it really is, in the end, oh, well, this is just a section of squares connected to another section of squares with this one little animal making it distinct. I want to get away from that going forward, but if a publisher picks it up, it's going to be ultimately up to them. I mean, hell, it could probably end up not even being a zoo game anymore. So, having said that, that was a overview of the design process as I went forward with the game, how it started, how it kind of evolved, why I chose this one over the 5 others, and ultimately where I plan to go with it beyond the competition. So thank you again, JR, for choosing me, allowing me to enter into this competition. I know you had over 50 people entered, and I'm going to be honest, I had never heard of you guys before. The only reason why I entered was because James Math put the link inside the Protospiel Facebook group, which led me to, well, that sounds cool. I'll go ahead and give it a shot. And it has pretty much opened me up to a few more possibilities in future game designs. I have a feeling I've made a couple links. I know a couple people have friended me on Facebook because of this. And hopefully opportunities, and I do plan to pay it forward. So I will talk to you all later, and coming up later will be the video on how to actually play. And then my entry should be ready to go. So thank you again for the opportunity. Bye.